the differences between ancient Macedonians and other ancient Greeks. It was not the Athenians who spread the Attic dialect into the Bactrian lands of Afghanistan and into India and Egypt. It was the Macedonians who, recognizing the provincialism of their own dialect, opted to adopt the refined Attic in all public aspects of their kingdom. The Romans, when they conquered Western Europe, they left the legacy of their language, which was Latin, behind them for the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese or Romanians to speak. Likewise, when the Arabs came out of the Arabic Peninsula, they converted the Christian Orthodox and Monophysites of the Middle East into Islam, and at the same time, people who till then spoke Syriac, Egyptian and Greek now had to learn Arabic. When the British conquered new lands in North America, Africa and Australia, the language they left behind them was English. So did the Spanish and Portuguese with their respective languages in Latin America, and the French in Africa and their other dominions, including Canada. It was the same with the Russians, who, starting originally from Kiev and later from Moscow, eventually brought the Russian language among the indigenous peoples of Siberia. What language difference should we ponder here did the Macedonians propagate? The Greek language, obviously. They could not have been any different than any other imperialist power in the world. Latin was but a barbarian language too, in its infancy, and though all educated Romans spoke and wrote Greek, this was not the language that the Roman army propagated. It was Latin. The same holds true with everyone else. All empires propagate their own state language. The language, dear friends, and I emphasize this, that the Macedonians propagated was the Hellenic language, yet not their local oral dialect. It was the more refined Attic dialect, which the Macedonian state had adopted since Archelaus, which is around 400 BC. After all, to use an example, when a person moves from Chicago's west side into a courtroom, despite his use of dialectical ghetto English in his hood, he or she still has to use the standard English, not far different from the Queen's English, if he or she has a chance to be understood in the courthouse in downtown Chicago. Although Chicago was built way after the original 13 colonies had broken off any attachment to the king and queen. So it was with the Macedonians and the Attic dialect. It simply had a more developed vocabulary. It was a written dialect of immense prestige in the Greek world, to which all Greeks, Doric, Aeolian or Ionian, bowed to after the literary developments of the 5th and the first part of the 4th century BC. There appear occasionally some skeptics among academics who are still waiting to see more finds like the Pella Katadesmos before they pronounce this a closed and shut case. Still others try to find excuses in the Eumenes incident or in the Philotas and the Kritos incidents to claim that Makedonisti means a language and not simply a dialect. They claim that Anevoa Makedonisti, he screamed in Macedonian, means that Alexander spoke in a different language. This is the same as arguing, dear friends, that the Spartans were not Greek because the Athenians, respecting the Spartan way of speaking in great depth using small sentences, had the expression «Το λακωνίδιν εστιν φιλοσοφήν». Speaking laconizing simply meant speaking in the Laconian dialect or in the way of speech of the Dorian Spartans. And when Alexander Anevoa Makedonisti, we understand that he shouted the order to the guards in dialect and not in Attic Greek. These are also the expressions of speaking Viotisti, like the Viocians, Lesvizin, like the people from Lesbos, Zorizin, like the Dorians, and finally Attikizin, Attikisti, speaking like the Attics, the Athenians. Returning to Alexander, who Anevoa Makedonisti, we need to remember that we do not speak the same way when we are in front of an audience, in church, in the classroom, or in a business meeting, as we do when we are in utter distress and we fight for our life, or even when we cheer for our favorite sports team in the field. In these instances, we revert to the dialect we spoke playing as children in the streets, and not in the scholarly and cultivated language we employed to write our papers in the university. Speaking of a cultivated language, Theodoros of Sicily, Theodoros Sikelos, tells us that before Alexander left Susa, one of the royal capitals of the Persian Empire, he left his royal captives, the family of King Zabios, there, and he continued on, not without making certain that they will learn the language of the new regime he was establishing, so that the Persian aristocracy could communicate with the new masters, the Macedonians. Μετά δε ταύτα, την μεν δαριού μητέρα και τας σιγατέρας και των ιών απέλειπεν εν Σούσης και παρακατέστησε τους διδάξοντας την ελληνικήν διάλεκτον. Which means, after this, Alexander left Darius's mother, his daughters, and his sons in Susa, providing them with persons to teach them the Greek language. My dear friends, may God be with you. May you have a great week, and God willing, we shall speak again very soon.